Hello and welcome to my review of this new Ridley Scott movie, Napoleon. This is based on the small guy from France, the once emperor of France, Napoleon Bonaparte, and it's a 3 hour long epic historical movie. And I've been kind of worried about going into this movie and about how this movie will turn out to be because this year it's first of all it's been a trend in a way this year to make very long movies, no matter what they are about. And yeah, this year we had Oppenheimer, which was a historical drama, 3 hours long. Killers of the Flower Moon was 3.5 hours long. We even had movies like Mission Impossible 7, John Wick 4, Bo's Afraid. All of them 3 hours long, and I have to say, all of them are not perfect movies and movies that I would have wanted a little bit more from, even though I like most of them. And also, I've been worried about this film because simply it's the incomplete version. Everything that I know about this movie is that this movie was supposed to be 4 hours long. Then they had a deal with Apple because this movie is going to be released on Apple TV Plus next year. And what they want to do is they want to release the full 4 hour version on Apple TV Plus next year. And so for the theatrical release of this film, they basically cut it down over an hour, which to me seems like this was just going to be the incomplete version. And also, reviews of this movie haven't been the most positive, or at least not as positive as I would want from a big Ridley Scott epic historical drama. So yeah, I was skeptical, but I have to say that this movie is great, and I'm surprised positively. I did not expect this movie to be as good as it is, even though this is the shorter and incomplete version of what the movie is apparently going to be in its 4 hour length. So yeah, what this movie is a movie about Napoleon Bonaparte, the Emperor of France. And it's this typical historical rise and downfall story that we have seen a lot of times before in movies like, for example, Barry Lyndon, in Braveheart, in Marie Antoinette, and also other movies that are not typically seen as historical as some of these movies I just mentioned, movies like The Irishman or Goodfellas. And so this is a story, this rise and downfall format of a character that we are exploring. It's not very new, but I have to say that in this movie it feels fresh and it feels like something I haven't seen before. And I don't want to say anything against this format either because I like half of the movies I just mentioned. The first thing that I was very excited for, no matter what was going to be the content of the film itself, was the battles, because this movie is epic. The taste that I got from this movie was obviously through the trailers that I saw, and I was kind of worried because the only thing I've mostly seen was this battle in the ice. I think it was in Russia, but I'm not sure. And so yeah, I was kind of worried because this battle it doesn't really look as convincing to me. Like the background looks very digital and not very convincing, and even though it's very epic the way all of these guys fall into ice because they are tricked by Napoleon's and his mind-bending tactical strategies, I don't know, I was just not as convinced in the trailers. Well, I am more convinced this time seeing the actual movie, because this is one of 4 major battles in this film, and I have to say they are epic. Even this battle that looked kind of fake had a lot of amazing things about them. First of all, the fact that these battles feel like actual battles. They don't feel like it's just two sides and they are just running into each other. That does happen, but it still feels like everything that we see is so much more realistic, and actually these battles feel like people have thought about these battles, because it feels like these tactics actually make sense, and that's why I think these battles are just so interesting to watch. And it's also, in general, we have so many extras, so many people in the background, so much is happening on the screen. It feels so grand. It really reminds me of movies like Lawrence of Arabia. And we know that Ridley Scott can do these historical movies very well because he already made Gladiator, he already made The Last Duel, he made a few more movies that I have not seen that are like this as well. So I was excited for him doing this, and I was not disappointed at all. But one thing I do really like about this movie is the fact that it tries to explore Napoleon in a way that isn't just trying to glorify him. It would be difficult to glorify a person who has done the things he has, because under his leadership a lot of people have died, and so that's obviously one thing they try to not really show in a good way. They try to portray his battle tactics as something great, which in a way they are for France. You know, we see all these big battles, and the way he just like casually wins these battles without really like seeming like he has a big struggle about them. And that's obviously one great thing, but still, there's a lot of things that he didn't really do right as a leader. And in the same way, he also is a very flawed individual as a person itself. The relationship between him and his wife, Josephine, played by Vanessa Kirby, is very much prominent in this movie, just as much as the history, if not even more than the history he has in all the battles. And so yeah, he isn't really portrayed as a very good person, and I really like that. And what I had to think about for the whole time was this is the second movie in 2023 about Joaquin Phoenix playing a guy who is very pathetic and who has a very awkward and just sad sex scene in this 3 hour long epic movie. But yeah, this part about Napoleon's life that is about Josephine is also just really interesting because it's a very flawed relationship between these two, and also the acting from both of them is amazing. The acting in general is really good. I haven't seen a single thing in this film that seemed like it was bad from an acting standpoint, and yeah, especially these two are really good. And I do have to say that not everything about this relationship was super interesting, and it has some moments where I felt a little bit bored, but it feels like an objectively well portrayed look at how this relationship could have been. I don't know if it was like this, but you know, it seems realistic. And that's why in general I felt like despite the shortened runtime, this film was a very whole and complete picture of a very influential and historical figure that basically everybody knows, but nobody knows personally, obviously. And in the end, it really left me not really desiring anything more from his character. There were a few things that I didn't really think were explored enough, but they weren't really just about him. They were just things that I thought were, you could have been more prominent in the movie than they seem to be. And that's, first of all, everything that happened in Russia. I'm not going to spoil this, even though it's basic history, but shit happens in Russia. I feel like this movie could have been exploring that a little bit more and a little bit longer than just like 10 minutes. That's one thing. Also, a few things regarding the family of Napoleon in his later life could have been also explored a little bit more, because I felt like there was more to explore. But I do have to mention that it's more like, just thinking back on the movie, I would have liked this to be explored a little bit more, because it feels like such an important part about Napoleon's whole life, and because the movie is already so long, I feel like there should have been a little bit more about this. But in general, while the movie was going, I never felt like the movie was trying to leave something out, and it was edited out well enough so that I was not bothered by it, which is a good thing. I generally think that the editing in this movie is really good, and I rarely got bored about something. A few other issues that I have is just the fact that sometimes the movie trying to portray Napoleon as a flawed individual seems to go a little bit over the top, and I don't know if that was intentional and if they really just try to portraying as kind of a goofball, I guess, in some scenes. My friend next to me laughed a lot in this film, sometimes uncomfortably, sometimes it was genuinely like really funny shit that happened in this film. And I don't know if it was supposed to be or if it was by accident, but sometimes the movie just goes overboard with how ridiculous Napoleon seems as a character, because he is so over the top, and I didn't really feel like that was so fitting. But at the same time, I also don't think it was completely bothering me. I have to say it was refreshing to see in a movie like this. Whereas in a movie like Oppenheimer, for example, where we also have a very flawed individual person who can be looked at very critically, there wasn't really a lot of humor in that movie because it was trying to be more dramatic. And in this movie, it's just a different approach to basically the same thing. And I don't think that's a bad thing, even though I don't think it always works. And also, again, what I had already said is the fact that sometimes the story between Josephine and Napoleon isn't always as interesting as it could have been. And those were some moments where I got bored a little bit, but then the movie picked up again. And I'd rather have a movie that bores me for maybe a few minutes, but that is in its whole complete and doesn't feel like it left out too much, rather than a movie that is flowing maybe very well, but that just leaves me desiring more, and that leaves me kind of disappointed. And I feel like every single stage that was important about Napoleon's life in this film was explored well enough, and I never really felt like I needed a lot more. And so, yes, I am actually very positively surprised about how much I like this film. So I'll give the theatrical version of Napoleon, directed by Ridley Scott, an 8 out of 10 or an 8.5 out of 10. And yeah, I'm feeling very happy about the fact that I like this movie more than basically a lot of people on the internet seem to do. So thank you for watching, and go watch Napoleon if you want to. It's a great movie. See you guys next time.